Hello, I'm Ian Hinchke, Chief Advocate with National Seniors Australia. And today we're going to learn a bit about aged care and how it's managed in Australia. With me is Peter Vincent, and Peter has been the CEO and Managing Director of Aged Care Management of Australia for the last 30 years and been in nursing for 40 years. So Peter, tell us about Aged Care Management Australia. What does it actually do?
Aged Care Management Australia is we're an independent advisory service to the sector. We've been in operation as an advisory service since 2006. Essentially, we started as a family business, my wife Helen and myself, and we worked providing contract management to small providers and larger providers around the country. So we do work at a national level. Over the last few years, we've expanded our services. We now have an office in Perth. We have a national operations manager, Fiona Duncan, who controls our services over there. And we provide advice as required by providers from the for-profit sector and from the not-for-profit sector.
And is it mainly for-profit now or not-for-profit or 50-50? What's aged care looking like in Australia today?
Aged care is still pretty much a 50-50 split. There's no imbalance between the two.
A lot of people are worried about that, and we often see stories in the media saying we should get rid of all the for-profits. What's your view on that?
Look, the only difference between for-profit and not-for-profit is how the two businesses treat their surplus at the end of the day. The not-for-profits, which are generally made up from the church and charitable groups or benevolent associations reflecting like the Italians or the Greeks or the Chinese for even, they will put their surplus entirely back into the business, into the provision of care and the development of their services. Whereas the not-for-profit sector, they will pay their directors and shareholders dividends, which will come out of that surplus, which reduces the amount of money that they then have to put back into the service that they provide.
Now, your job, I sort of understand it, is to manage, advise, and I also understand when things go wrong, you get called in. Who calls you in?
We work as independent advisors and nurse advisors. The Commonwealth Government used to have a panel of independent nurse advisors and administrators. And we sat on that panel from 2009 through until 2016 when the Commonwealth disbanded it. They would provide a list of people like ourselves to providers who were under sanction, and then they would contact people from that list, and we would, try and find the right person as a fit to help them fix their sanctions. So it's essentially the provider that will come to us to seek out our services.
So the regulator goes in, looks at an aged care home and says, look, you've got to lift your game. You're not doing well in this area or that area. Mm-hmm. They come to you and you say, how can we get out of this situation?
Yes.
So what are the common situations at the moment? Because we hear about everything from people being over-drugged, restrained. We hear a lot of horror stories. Is it as bad as what we hear?
I'd like to think that it's not as bad as what we're hearing. And on the whole, bearing in mind that we have over 2,000 odd nursing homes across the country, the majority of them are doing really well, and the level of care and service provided is exceptional. We would be world leaders in the way we provide aged care. With the COVID pandemic that we have at the moment, that's having a significant impact on the compliance maintained by certain providers. And in fact, just in the last week and a half, 13 facilities in Victoria have come under sanction because of issues related to their management or preparedness to manage a COVID outbreak.
Well, look, I think we might talk about COVID in more detail in a moment. But Peter, Aged Care Management Australia's job is to fix those problems that are in the system, regardless of COVID. Should people have faith in the system? We often hear National Seniors members saying, look, I'd rather jump over the back of a cruise ship than go into an aged care home. I had a lady say that to me the other day, and I thought that's a terrible indictment on the system. Are people being overly worried?
I think generally people are being overly worried. There has been a lot of negative media in recent times. My mother's in an aged care facility here in Adelaide, and she's provided, on the whole, with excellent care. We have good communication with that provider, and we're kept well informed. What generally happens when facilities are sanctioned is that there's a breakdown in communication between the management, the executive and the board and the staff working on the ground. One of the most frequently asked questions is, how can a facility be compliant one week against what used to be all 44 standards, now 8 standards, and then several months later fail the vast majority of those? And that's something that we've seen a number of times. We've been engaged on 10 occasions over the last 4 or 5 years to recover sanctions. And on every occasion, it relates to the organisation's ability to provide well-trained staff who understand what their role is, to fund the facility appropriately, and to deal with complaints. Complaints is, and I think will continue to be, the number one cause or trigger for the Quality and Safety Commission to visit a facility and investigate issues of care.
Well, Peter, thanks very much for your time. Let's talk another time about training and that pesky issue of, is there enough money in the system?
Thank you, Anne.